It was so hard. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life.
This was not a role that people expected women to take on. These women were risking their lives in profound ways in order to serve their country.
There was a lot of women that didn't like the way the men treated them, but at the same time she did what she wanted. If she was interested in something, she did it.
I think of all the things I've done in my life, the WASP has been the most interesting and has kept being interesting.
Colorado Experience is a co-production of Rocky Mountain PBS and History Colorado.
History Colorado brings history to life for audiences of all ages. Through exhibits, collections, and historic preservation programs throughout the state, History Colorado connects people to the stories, places, and heritage of Colorado's past that provide perspectives on today and inspire our choices for tomorrow. Find out more at www.historycolorado.org. Additional funding provided by El Pomar Foundation and the Betcher Foundation, celebrating 75 years of philanthropy in Colorado.
With additional funding and support from these fine organizations. And from viewers like you, thank you.
There weren't very many girls that wanted to fly, and there weren't many girls that did fly. I just liked doing it. In a way, flying was romantic to me, romance. Taking off and landing was just the joy of my life.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
We woke up one morning and the Pearl Harbor had been bombed. And oh my gosh, all the boys were so excited they were going to join up, and some of them did. Everyone was very patriotic. In fact, I was very patriotic. And as my daughter can tell you, I still am.
The war demanded a national mobilization from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy. The United States had had a couple of years to build up to this new economy, but the war effort required supreme service from every sector of American life. Civilian men either volunteered for the military or were inducted into the armed forces, or they went into factory jobs. New factory jobs opened up for women. Winning the war required the total effort of the American public.
In a month or 6 weeks, a man can go to work as a welder on ships, tanks, guns. With every man utilized, we are still short millions of hands. We must call upon women. At first, women go into service jobs, releasing men for the Army and for war industries. Out of 50 million women at the beginning of the war, 10 million were working. In war towns all over the United States, women are called upon to leave their homes and take jobs.
The war had ironically expanded the role and the need for women in areas of work life where they had never been asked to serve before. Professional women were still school teachers and secretaries and housewives. But of course, on farms and much of the undeveloped part of the United States, the best way to get around or to do your work was with an airplane. Some of them had older brothers who had served in World War I or fathers who had served in World War I. Some of them needed to learn how to fly planes to dust the crops in their fields. Some of them served as private couriers. There's certainly no reason why a woman couldn't get a pilot's license before the war.
My brother was a pilot, and he went up to Canada and flew for the Royal Canadian Air Force. And when he came home, he'd rent a plane, and one day he took me up, and I just loved it. I said, I want to do this, and he says, oh, you can't do that, Annie. He says, you're good at good grades, you can't fly an airplane. And I just learned to fly in spite of him.
At the beginning of World War II, the United States Army only had a couple of thousand pilots in uniform, and they had to go on a crash course to bring in new pilots to serve in combat missions overseas. So many male pilots, in fact, were used during the war that the Air Force decided to bring in female pilots as well and do non-military missions. But to serve in this military capacity was something that nobody really expected.
This is Texas, cradle of our Army's Air Force. This is an AAF field, too. But over headquarters rides a strange little girl gremlin called Pimpinella. And out of those buses are stepping girls. Girls who give a new angle to an Air Force story. They're WASPs, Women's Air Force Service Pilots.
WASP stands for Women's Air Force Service Pilots. So the WASPs were created to ferry planes from the factories to the airfields, to serve as test pilots and flight instructors, to tow targets over anti-aircraft ranges, to do any number of non-combat piloting missions during the war.
I had a friend who was going into the WASPs. It was my senior year in college, and I was going to be a teacher. The dean of the Teachers College had gotten a special job for me, and she really wanted me to go down. It was in Webster Grove, Missouri, and it was one of the top jobs. And but I just could not give up the opportunity of flying. And I didn't want to be married and sit at home anyway.
There were, of course, many women in the United States who knew how to pilot an aircraft prior to World War II, and they were the ones who tended to be attracted to the WASP service. But the women who served in the WASPs went through the exact same training as the male pilots. They had to learn the complicated combat maneuvers. They had to learn how to pull a bomber out of a power dive. They had to do everything that a man had to do, and many of these women felt that if they had been asked to serve in combat, they could have done so easily.
It's merely the beginning of another non-ladylike day of grind and GI study, which won't end until long after the Texas sun has set. Very simply and seriously, the WASPs, girls like Mary Abbott, maybe a little younger, maybe older, are willing to plow into as rugged a 6-month stretch as anything handed to women in the whole war effort. Map reading and physics, navigation and code, with strict AAF exams in each, too. For men, it would be tough. It's tough for girls, too.
I learned to fly at Avenger Field, and it was the same program that the men went through, except we did it faster than the boys did. We went through had primary planes, which was the PT-19, was an open cockpit, and then we had the intermediate flying and advanced, and the advanced was the AT-6. You only had so much time to learn how to do it.
To be accepted as a WASP, each girl had to have 35 hours in the air beforehand, enough to know men's airplane talk when they hear it. But flying here is different, Kay. The instrument board of that Link trainer has instruments and radio devices and controls you never dreamed of. This is the Army, Kay.
When you first start, the coordination is not so easy. Your hand was on a stick, and your feet were flying. And so the coordination between your hand and your feet was what made you fly. You know, that I was going to take the test with the Army instructor. And I just hurriedly got in, and the instructor said to me, just calm down. He says, you're just too excited. You just sit there for a minute. And then he said, okay, let's take off. Then we took off, and he said, he pulled back the gas. He says, the power, and he says, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to fly straight forward. And he says, you passed the first test. When I learned a solo, I was really kind of afraid to do that because I'd had eight hours of flying, and then you could a solo, and you just take off from the airfield and fly around the field and land. It was just so exciting to me to do that, and to be up there with the clouds and look down at little trees and little houses. It was just an amazing feeling. I don't think everyone felt that way about it, but I did. We'd have to take parachutes out to the plane, and they were heavy for me. When I graduated, I just could put that parachute over my shoulder, take my bag, and I was so strong, I could just walk out to that plane and get in all by myself.
More than 25,000 women applied for the Women's Air Force Service Pilot Program. Over 1,800 were accepted, and 1,074 actually completed training and served. But of course, most people felt that these girls, as they would have called them, were too small and too frail, not strong enough to handle the big B-29 Superfortress or the powerful Mustang fighter planes that these women had to fly.
This scene provides a pretty fair picture of what the girls look like from all angles. None of them are under 21 or over 35. Now, chinning yourself is a very wholesome kind of, thank you, sir, a very wholesome kind of conditioner for young ladies about to embark on a serious venture.
I was sent to San Antonio, Texas. My job was to fly officers to their destinations. I think I was sent to Randolph because I was easygoing, and I didn't care if the boys or the men regarded me as inferior.
She did what she wanted to do, always, and really always positive, in a way that was curious to me, because it was always there. She was never depressed or bummed out or particularly angry. She really was a pretty smooth person.
But I was not someone that said, I am better than you are, I'm a girl, some girls had that attitude, and they were not treated too well. And some were just not treated too well because they were women.
Of course, what the WASPs were doing was risky, flying experimental aircraft, ferrying brand new factory aircraft to military bases, putting them through their shakedown, towing targets that were being shot at from the ground over training ranges. A number of women did die in service. And one WASP recalled that what it was like to lose her roommate in a flight accident and then have to bring the body of her roommate home to her parents and explain what had happened.
We had instrument flying, and that's when you're above the clouds and you can't see the land, so you're flying by the instruments of your plane. Very difficult, the instrument flying. And I was coming into Houston to land, and I turned on the radio to get the information on how I was to land, and all of a sudden my radio went out. And the ocean was on one side and the land was on the other, and I couldn't see a thing. And all of a sudden I came down under the clouds, and there was the airfield, but there was still no radio. And the planes were all coming in. It was 5 o'clock at night, and the planes were all coming in to land, and they just would drop down right before me. And we were taught to be very safe. One thing the women did was a very safe flying, and we were taught to do that or we were washed out. So I kept going around the airfield in my pattern to land, and here someone's plane would just drop right down before me. Then I'd have to go around again. Finally, I got brave enough and just kept going and flying in and landing. When we landed, there was a little Jeep that parked us. It says, "Follow me." And then he parked, we'd follow him and park our plane. And when I got out and got into the truck, all the guys were saying that was one of the scariest times they'd had, because there was no radio and the weather was so bad. There were so many planes coming in.
The great icon for women during the Second World War was Rosie the Riveter, a woman who was both feminine and masculine. The great poster showed her with her arm bowed and her muscle flexed, saying, "We can do it." Women were celebrated by taking over the factory roles which had previously belonged to men, at least for the course of the war. As the United States demobilized at the end of the war, these same women who had sacrificed so much were told to give way for the returning veterans to come home and take their place. Women served in the Army Air Force from September of 1942 until December 1944. By 1944, the war was beginning to wind down, and the United States Army Air Corps decided that the roles that women pilots had been performing could be taken over by men. They were told that it was time to go back to the kitchen.
It was before the war was over. The Congress decided they no longer wanted the WASPs. The boys were coming back from overseas, from Italy, and they could be used in our jobs, and so they decided to disband the WASPs, and it was a sad day when they did. They just told us at the airfield. So I just got on the train and went home. They didn't pay our way for transportation to and from any place. When some of the girls were killed, they did not take their bodies back to their families.
At the moment, there's a bill in Congress to bring them into the Air Force. It makes no difference, for as they go up to receive their wings from the top woman pilot of them all, the founder of the WASPs, Miss Jacqueline Cochran, each WASP, like other women in other services, has achieved no little thing. She's gone into a man's world because the men needed her, gone through a tough ordeal as just a girl, and come out a girl pilot with the U.S. Army Air Force.
We were not part of the Air Force all the time I was flying. We were not treated like a veteran. We were civilians.
The implications of not being recognized by the military is that the female pilots didn't receive veterans benefits at the end of the war. They weren't subject to the GI Bill. Although they had risked much, they were not given the same rewards that male soldiers had received for serving overseas. For women who died, they were treated as civilians. They received no military services, no recognition of their death in near combat circumstances.
It was after the war that the women decided they wanted to be actual we were supposed to be veterans, officers. And then because of the end of the war, we were not. And some women resented the fact. You know, I really didn't care. I got to learn to fly free. I had the best job in the whole world, and I really didn't mind not being a veteran. But some of the girls did, and so they fought for this in the Congress, and we are veterans now. Well, that was really exciting when they let us know. I couldn't believe, I can't still believe that I have a Congressional Medal of Honor. And we were all invited to come to Washington, D.C. and to receive it. And they had special arrangements for us that we could bring our relatives with us. We all stayed in a hotel. It was like a reunion. They had special ceremonies for the people, the WASP that had died, and they had the formation of planes that flew over. It was quite an experience.
My mother's life, I started knowing about it in high school. She didn't really even mention the WASPs very much. We knew she was a WASP, and kind of what was that? Oh, she flew airplanes. Oh, that's interesting. But it wasn't any big deal for her.
They always call us pioneers now in flying. I don't think of myself as a pioneer. We were just learning how to fly. And now I look back on it, it is different. I was a little different to go to join the WASP and learn how to fly. But I didn't think of myself that way when I was younger. Some of the WASPs are really, really outstanding women. Like one became a lawyer, one became a psychiatrist when she graduated in our class. I think there's only about 5 still alive. They were different. They were different. They were not the run of the mill.
She had a big impact on the town, as did my dad. Because they were starting things, they were starters, they were very involved in the community. It's a very social little town here.
Oh, I just loved Grand Junction. It was so friendly, it was small, much smaller than it is now. And everyone was very, very friendly. Yes, I did a lot of things here in this town. Art started the country club, and the women were very involved in the country club, trying to get it going too. So I spent a lot of time with that. I did volunteer work out at the home for the children. There were babies, and you just fall in love with them, so they were so darling.
She was the head of the Republicans. She started all these quilting clubs. Very creative woman. And she really did impart that feeling of you can do what you want. I got that, and I did.
Well, I have always been patriotic. I think it's probably started when I was in the WASP. And during the war, everyone was patriotic during the war. I don't know anyone that wasn't. And after the war also.
The war effort required supreme service from every sector of American life. Women during the war had expanded into new roles all over the country. But of course, these women who came from cities and farms throughout the country risked their lives and health in many of the same ways that combat pilots did. The legacy of the WASP is that today women continue to serve in the military as pilots, both in combat and non-combat roles, with military evacuation helicopters, refueling jets, but also reconnaissance missions and other more combat-oriented roles.
But I think of all the things I've done that has remained through my life, it was fun doing it, it was fun being a WASP. The word is fun. I had a marvelous time. I don't think everyone is so inclined to do what I did, or even to be interested in politics or their country. But a girl that is interested can do anything she wants. And that's what I learned about myself. When I learned to fly, that I could do anything I wanted. All I had to do was try.
Colorado Experience is a co-production of Rocky Mountain PBS and History Colorado.
History Colorado brings history to life for audiences of all ages. Through exhibits, collections, and historic preservation programs throughout the state, History Colorado connects people to the stories, places, and heritage of Colorado's past that provide perspectives on today and inspire our choices for tomorrow. Find out more at www.historycolorado.org. Additional funding provided by El Pomar Foundation and the Betcher Foundation, celebrating 75 years of philanthropy in Colorado.
With additional funding and support from these fine organizations. And from viewers like you, thank you. This episode is available on Blu-ray. Visit our website to order. There's more Colorado Experience online at rmpbs.org/Colorado Experience, Facebook and Twitter.